Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to crack the code on something that sounds super complicated, but is actually vital if you're ever dealing with official documents across international borders.
So just imagine this for a second. You're moving to another country for a new job. Maybe you're planning a wedding abroad, or you're trying to set up a business overseas. You've got all your paperwork, your birth certificate, your degree, you name it, all lined up and ready to go. You hand it all in, feeling pretty good about it, and then, bam, you get told it's not valid. It's just this incredibly frustrating, confusing roadblock that can bring all your plans to a screeching halt. So you're left wondering, why isn't my perfectly official document official enough? Well, the answer comes down to a single word. And that word is apostille. Now, I know, it sounds a little fancy, maybe a bit complicated, but it's actually the key to a whole system that was designed to solve this exact problem. So let's break down what an apostille really is and the big international agreement that makes this whole thing work. Okay, so an apostille is basically a certificate of authenticity. But here's the crucial thing to understand. It doesn't verify the contents of your document. Nope. All it does is verify that the signature of the public official on it, the notary, the county clerk, whoever, is legit. It's literally a passport for your paperwork. That's the best way to think about it. It lets your document travel and be recognized internationally.
And the reason this whole passport system works so smoothly is thanks to something called the Hague Convention. You can think of it like a club of countries that all got together and said, hey, let's agree on one simple, uniform way to do this, which cuts through a mountain of bureaucratic red tape.
Now, even with that system, trying to figure this out can feel like you're lost in a maze of government offices and different rules. But believe it or not, you can figure out pretty much everything you need to do by just asking one simple question.
And this question, well, it's the cheat code. It's the key that unlocks the whole thing and shows you exactly which path your document has to take. Honestly, if you only remember one thing from this entire explainer, make it this question. Ready for it? The question is just this: who signed the document? And, this is key, we're not talking about your signature. We are talking about the public official who issued it or who notarized it. Their identity is the absolute key to this whole process. This right here clears up the single biggest misconception about the apostille. It has nothing to do with you or your signature. It's all about authenticating the authority of that public official who put their stamp on your document, whether that's a notary public, a county clerk, or some federal officer. It's their signature and their title that's being verified. So, let's see this in action. Let's see how this one simple question, who signed it, determines everything. It tells you whether your document needs to start at the state level or go all the way up to the federal level. All right, first up we have state-level documents. And honestly, this is the category most people will be dealing with. We're talking about any document that comes from a state or some local authority.
All the usual suspects. Your birth certificate, a marriage license, maybe a notarized power of attorney, or your school transcripts. These are all signed by state or local officials, which means their journey always begins at the state level.
And then, on the other side of the coin, we've got federal-level documents. And just like the name says, these are the ones that come straight from a U.S. federal agency. So think bigger, national-level stuff, like an FBI background check or official military records. Since these are signed by a federal official, they get to skip the whole state process entirely and go straight to the top, to the federal level for their authentication. Okay, so knowing who signed the document is half the battle. You've got that down. But the other critical piece of the puzzle is where it's going. Is the final destination country a member of that Hague Convention club or not? Now, if your document was signed by a state official and it's going to a Hague country, the process is, well, it's beautiful. It's so simple. You just send it to the Secretary of State where it was issued, they slap the apostille on it, and that's it. You are done. Finished. But what if that exact same state document is going to a country that's not in the Hague Club? Well, just look at the difference. It becomes a whole three-step dance. First, it has to be certified by the state. Then, it has to get authenticated by the U.S. Department of State. And then, for the final step, it has to be legalized by that country's embassy. It's a much more involved process. And for those federal documents, the logic is pretty much the same. They always start their journey at the U.S. Department of State. If they're heading to a Hague country, great, that's the only step. But if they're going to a non-Hague country, they also need that final, extra step of embassy legalization. So,
How do you actually use all this information? To get through this whole process without pulling your hair out, you just need the answers to a few key questions. Think of this as your own personal apostille toolkit.
Seriously, if you have the answers to these 4 questions, you can map out the entire path for your document. First, the destination tells you if you're on the simple apostille path or the more complex legalization one. Second, knowing what the document is, who signed it, and where it was signed, that tells you exactly which office to start with. Simple as that.
Which kind of brings us to a final thought. This whole system is based on a treaty from 1961, so it's really easy to look at it and think it's just some outdated piece of bureaucracy. But maybe the apostille is actually a brilliant, unsung hero of global diplomacy. A quiet agreement that just hums along in the background, making it possible for all of our modern lives and businesses to cross borders every single day.